Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Rising Network, to our online webinar, COVID-19, Maintaining Wellbeing and Normality During Self-Isolation and Working from Home, with invited guest speaker, Dr. Minha Rajput-Ray. My name is Lily, and I'm the founder of the Rising Network. A warm welcome. So before we begin today's webinar, just a few housekeeping points to keep the online events flowing smoothly. So this online event is being recorded. During the talk, please can I ask you to mute your microphone and also to put your phones on silent. The way that we will run Q&A is that we will take questions after Minha's talk. And to do this, there are two options. You can either type your question in the chat box and I will read the question out to Minha, or the second option is to select raise hand and wait until the speaker or myself selects you. At this point, when your name is called, if you could just say your name, where you're calling from, and ask your question. Okay, so the agenda for today, a quick welcome and brief introduction to the Rising Network by myself, followed by Minha's talk, which we will look at starting at about 12:10. Q&A, we've got 10 minutes at the end, and then we'll look at wrapping up at 1 p.m. So a little bit about ourselves. So purpose of the Rising Network is that we use the power of community to empower women to realize their true potential and to achieve balance and happiness. And our vision is very much to be recognized as a global community that empowers women to be change makers, but it all begins with you. So, you know, my belief is that before we can create any change, we have to make those positive changes within ourselves, around our mindset, self-limiting beliefs, etc., and upskill before we can make effective change. So a bit about the backstory and how the Rising Network was born. It came out of my need originally. So back in 2012, at the time, there were various things happening in my life, both professionally and personally. So professionally, I was working in technology, and I found myself probably one or two of the only women in the room at the time. The representation of women in tech wasn't great, and if we look at STEM more broadly, back in kind of the end of 2012, 2013, the representation was, I believe it was floating around 13%, so not very good. And then in my personal life, lots of transitions were happening that I was trying to manage, which resulted in, you know, my overall health and well-being kind of deteriorating. And I found that I had lost my sense of purpose, my passion and direction. So out of that need, the Rising Network was born, really based around supporting me with these three key areas. I was very much looking for a support network, a peer-to-peer support network that went across all sectors, because I wanted to, not in addition to talking about professional development and upskilling, I really wanted to learn more about myself, my personal self. Second was, I was very much looking to improve my overall health and well-being, and very much looking to gain work-life balance and to pick up tools and techniques to manage my stress a bit better. And then third point was to that whole self-discovery and life purpose, really looking to reconnect with myself, to discover my purpose and direction, which I had lost back then. So a bit about the timeline and the Rising Network. So that happened to me in December 2012. So shortly after I launched the Rising Network as an informal meetup, where I held my first ever event in Cambridge. Fast forward 3 years later, I made the decision to leave full-time employment. So I transitioned from being an employee to becoming an entrepreneur and launched the Rising Network formally in April 2016 in Cambridge. Fast forward to 2018, we delivered our first annual International Women's Day annual festival. April 2019, we launched our online learning. So we launched online webinars, masterclasses, and online events. 2019 in June, we expanded and moved out to London and launched our London chapter with a leadership team there. So in addition to our Cambridge chapter, we've got a London chapter, which we launched last year in the summer. And then as of this month, we have today, actually, we have launched our online monthly subscription and we are ramping up our online resources. So what you'll see moving forward is a lot more of our online catch-up videos from events, which is available for members. And to date, to summarise, we've had just over 7,000 people attend our events and we've delivered over 200 events to date. So just a little bit about chapters. I know at the moment, because of COVID-19, we aren't able to get out and about, but once we are able to, local chapters are a way for you to connect with women on a local level outside of the online forums and the online events that we do. So it's a way to connect kind of local communities. So you're able to meet with people in your local area. It's a great way for us to collaborate with one another. So the Rising Network, we don't do anything in isolation. We work with the community, with business, and with women from all walks of life across all sectors. So it's our way of enabling us to collaborate locally, but it's also a great way for you to collaborate and to build your network on a local level if you're looking to do that. So we've got one in Cambridge and in London. And it's also a way for us to create something unique on a local level, tailored to suit the needs of the people in those areas. So here are some of the events, the type of events that we run. These are the face-to-face ones. We have quarterly networking and learn. We have masterclasses, social networking events, workshops. We've also launched this month Women Rising in STEM. And our flagship annual conference festival is the Rising Festival celebrating International Women's Day. And then online events, great way to continue on with your learning and to connect with like-minded people. These are the different formats that we run: masterminds, masterclasses, and various webinars. So I would like to invite you to join if you're not part of the Rising Network and a member. It's a great way to expand your network. It's a chance for you to invest in yourself. Quite often we don't do that enough. So invest in yourself and develop yourself and upskill. We offer free to attend, lots of free to attend events, plus special member discounts, catch-up videos. So as of April, we'll be launching our past events from the past 12 months online, so you can catch up with any of the videos that you missed. It's a great opportunity to advance professionally. So, you know, we cover lots of different subjects, including communications, leaderships, you know, how to work effectively in teams, time management. And then most importantly, you know, we're here to support you with your next steps and to navigate those tricky transitions in life that we all face. Very important point, which is why I set up the Rising Network in 2012, 2013, was very much to achieve balance and well-being. So what you'll see is lots of events, lots of online events to help you pick up tools and techniques to do this. And also to have fun. You know, that's one of our key values is for us to have more fun. And what you'll find when you have any touch points with the Rising Network, or if you come along to any of our events, they're fun and we deliver everything in a really relaxed and informal setting to support you whilst you're learning. So that is enough about the Rising Network. Thank you for listening. I hope that provided you with some insights into who we are. And I would now like to hand over to our speaker, Dr. Minha Rajput-Ray, who will be delivering this afternoon's talk. Thank you. Minha, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Lily and the team at the Rising Network. Thank you to all yourselves. I can see some familiar and perhaps some unfamiliar names who have joined us. For those of yourselves who know me, I have been part of the Rising Network for the last almost 3-4 years, and very much seen this as an opportunity for people to come together, notwithstanding this particular moment in time. Perhaps it would be helpful for me to give you a little bit more information as we go along. So Lily, could we go to the next slide, please? My role is very much bridging the areas of medicine and work health. So as medical director of the NEDPRO Global Center for Nutrition and Health, which is headquartered in Cambridge and operationally active in 16 countries around the world, this has been a time of a lot of change, simply because we are looking after not only our colleagues, we're also looking after our beneficiaries, etc., in so many different areas. And of course, my other role is that as an occupational and disability physician, as a work doctor, where through the International Commission on Occupational Health, we provide good workplace practices. So really, moving on to the next slide, today is a real opportunity for us to be able to perhaps come together, connect as a community, and have an exchange, a very mutual exchange on how we can support ourselves and each other. This has been a time of absolute change. And what I'm going to go through is really how to set up a home working environment. This is from an occupational health perspective. How to create the daily routine that will help you thrive. Remote working, how to stay connected, and a guide to maintaining balance and well-being, plus exercises and tips. Now, a lot of this would come naturally to some of us. For those of us who have been perhaps working remotely or we work virtually already, but there are a number of us, and believe you me, I'm not immune to this. I'm also feeling the shift. In a way, if I may share, I'm grieving a little bit as well. I think we all are thinking, oh gosh, life was so different 2 weeks ago. There I was, going for the commute, or there I was, I could go out, anytime I wanted. And all of a sudden, we're having to be in one place. But not only be in one place, make a whole load of changes to, how we are coping, our thoughts, our behaviors, our feelings. Plus, we have other people around us. So there's a lot to think here in terms of resetting our inner compass. Lily, if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm sure we've all seen a lot of this already on the news. It's been there 24/7, social media. But the very reason that I'm showing this slide is to be able to say that, in a way, although we have been instructed and requested, or perhaps in other parts of the world, ordered to stay at home, this is actually something that we're doing for the greater good. And we know this simply because without taking the current measures that we're taking, not only are we putting ourselves and our loved ones at risk, we are putting the healthcare system under immense pressure. I'm sure we all know what we need to do in terms of washing hands, using tissues, prevention, being aware of symptoms, and just generally looking after ourselves. Now, I repeat that again, looking after ourselves. Looking after ourselves in a time of immense stress doesn't come easily. It's perhaps easily said than done. And I hope, and I sincerely hope, that today's webinar will give us a few tips. And even if each one of us here can perhaps apply a couple of tips from today, then perhaps, we can collectively be able to make a general difference to the overall situation for ourselves and for others. Lily, next slide, please. So this is just a really stark example of how one person on a bus was able to infect 9 people. And it's quite striking that the distance is 4.5 meters, between the person who was the initial COVID carrier and the person who's infected. And it just goes to show that this is one of the reasons why what we're doing currently, although it may seem really odd, we don't, sort of talk to people standing 2 meters away. It feels very impersonal. It feels very different. There are reasons why we're doing it. And as long as we can be able to explain this to our brain, that can allow us to start to rationalize what we are in a situation, in a way, what has become the new normality. Next slide, please, Lily. So really moving on, what I thought would be helpful is to explore, and I'll go through this step by step, are the 3 zones. So really, who do I choose to be during the COVID? And of course, it's understandable that some of us are living alone, some of us live with partners, some of us have family, some of us have young children, some of us have responsibility for older parents. My personal circumstance, we have 3 generations living in the one house. So there's a lot happening. And of course, trying to think about, finances, business continuity, working, a whole load of things here. So really, who do I choose to be? Just giving everybody a few moments to start to calibrate now. Am I in the fear zone? Basically, am I perhaps panicking? Am I acting a bit like a victim who's thinking, oh gosh, why has this happened? And I was just going to set up my business, or I was just going to start off my launch, or something new is happening, and why me? Fear zone. And it's, of course, we must say the media is helpful, but certainly having every channel on, 24/7 can sometimes add to this, because it's not only adding to what's happening in the UK, it's adding to what's happening globally, basically. And when you hear about 30,000 deaths, and that's of today, 30,000 people have died over the entire world, we think to ourselves, our brain's instinct is to say, oh gosh, I've got to protect you. So that's the fear zone. From the fear zone, then we come into the learning zone to start thinking about, hang on, I don't have to look at so many websites. I can probably stick to 1 or 2, websites, or maybe just watch the news once a day. Try to put off my notifications on social media if possible. And I recognize that, we're in a situation, we're all collectively in the situation. And what is it that I'm going to start to develop? This starts to clear the space in the brain. This is when people start thinking of, perhaps going on to an online module, signing for a webinar, being able to say, okay, who else can I connect with? Perhaps that's the person I used to work with a few years ago. Can I be able to, touch base with them, ask them how they're doing, do a slightly empathetic, phone call. And as part of that, I might be able to find any new opportunity. That's the learning zone. And hopefully what we hope to go on from here is to then go into the growth zone, which is where I'm finding myself being grateful every single day, despite the fact that, the broadband connection is, under competition. I've had to negotiate desk space. I've had to negotiate, timings when I shouldn't be disturbed. For example, this webinar, I've had to negotiate homeschooling. I've had to negotiate, trying to explain to my father, who's 72 years old, why he should not go outside. And we had a mini row as well. He didn't speak to me for 2 days. I'm just sharing this because these are realities of life. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I do not know how long this is going to last, but actually, if life has given me lemons right now, I'm going to make lemonade. And I know these are cliches and these are things that we hear about, but believe you me, this is the time that all the self-help stuff that we've attended or gone to or learned is really going to be put to test. Lily, could we have the next slide, please? Thank you. So remember I talked about a new normality? So that's a picture of me, just for reference. This is me on a work site. Remember I said part of me is as a work doctor. I'm very hands-on, you know. I just don't sit in a clinic listening to what patients do for their living. I actually go on site, I go to factories, I go to oil refineries, I go to manufacturing, I've worked with the police, I've worked with the armed forces, I've worked offshore. This incidentally is me with a full face protection respiratory mask at a site where they were manufacturing certain compounds, and there were some nasty emissions coming through. So we all had to be fully protected. And I find myself now being confined, if I may say, to four walls, my home, which is really the place that I should be using for rest, recuperation, and relaxation. And I'm having to make decisions about people who are perhaps offshore, or perhaps people who are, you know, key workers, you know, looking after, you know, the rest of our logistics in the country as we speak. And I feel very much out of my usual space, my usual ecosystem. So this is when I turn to the Batari box. Now the Batari box, and forgive me for those of you who do know about the Batari box, but it's what I do find time and time again a very, very helpful way of being able to reframe. So let's do this. My attitude. So if I'm happy, I'll smile. So my behavior will be that I'll smile. And then when I smile at you, you feel happy and you'll smile back at me. So let's do this as an exercise. Smile. Yep. And you feel happy, right? If I was feeling bad, if I had a bad day, you know, I'll be frowning, and everybody I interact with, somehow, subconsciously, I'll be frowning, and I would end up, you know, making them frown in a way, and the cycle goes on. So let's go back to smiles now. What I find is that in being able to do the right things, in being able to be a little bit flexible, in being able to appreciate that we are going through a bit of a stormy time, perhaps just resetting my attitude, my internal compass can make such a big difference for those people around me. And this is why I thought perhaps it would be helpful to illustrate the Batari box. Anytime, so for example, you know, if you have children and, you know, they don't want to do their homework, you're finding yourself becoming teacher incognito or becoming locum teacher, you know, let's think about how it is from their perspective. My 11-year-old daughter said to me, she said to me, Mama, how would you like to be around children for 2 weeks and not see any adult? And I really thought to myself, gosh, you know, she hasn't seen any children for the last 2 weeks. So it was a bit about reframing the conversation and being able to give myself an opportunity to reset my inner compass there. Next slide, please, Lily. So what we're going to do now is an interactive exercise. And if I can request for us to get a pen and a paper, please. Anything will do. And if we can draw 2 circles, please. And this is just to give you an example. We'll give you enough time, give ourselves enough time. And in these 2 circles, we can write down what I can control and what I can't control. And there's a bit of a caricature here. So what I can control is like I can set a routine as best possible. Please allow flexibility and buffer time. I can potentially limit my social media, because every time the brain gets distracted, you know, it takes a good 5 to 10 minutes to come back on track, especially if you're working from home and you want to try to be productive in the best way possible. What else can I control? I can control my kindness, my approach to things, or at least I can try to do that. I can control perhaps, you know, just being very diligent about hand washing, and also sometimes appropriately, you know, challenging, you know, people who may not be doing what they're supposed to be doing. So just to double check, you know, make sure people have washed hands at home nicely, make it a bit of a, sort of hand washing check almost. I can control perhaps, saying yes or saying no to people's requests. I can control being able to perhaps focus on what's necessary now, and maybe take a chance and take the time to maybe declutter stuff that's been waiting for weeks, months, maybe years to do, simply because I happen to be at home now. And at the same time, what is it that I can't control? Look, no one's got a crystal ball, and we do not know how long this is going to last. I can't control the actions of others. I can't control other people's motives, how other people will react, or even, how much will be perhaps rationed at the supermarket. So it's worthwhile, perhaps just another few moments just to write this down. And you could always come back to this when you have a moment after the call. And next slide, please, Lily, if you may. So what we're going to do now is an interactive exercise. Setting up the home working environment. I know we're all here with our webcams and computers sitting. So perhaps let's just do a little check. This is what we call a DSE mini assessment almost. Can you just check that your back is being supported? If you need to use a pillow, cushion, a rolled up towel, rolled up scarf, worthwhile, just double check that the lower part of your back is being supported. Please check that your feet are on a surface. This will depend on the height of your chair. Of course, there are official measurements that we tend to use, but not a problem, because worthwhile just ensuring that you can use a box or a little stool. Also to use your screen at arm's length. Pay attention to your wrists, try to minimize the reflective glare and adjust the lighting. And perhaps take a moment to breathe. And if you need any further information on reasonable adjustments, that particular website, I'm sure Lily will be able to circulate the slides or as part of the webinar. That's the link there. Next slide, please, Lily. Let's create a daily routine. I find that planning my day, ideally the night before, really helps. I'm working in blocks of time. I'm scheduling small breaks. And I have had to make an active effort to be flexible around my schooling and caring duties. I've actually had to do like a family debrief. And this has happened at least twice a week, almost to sort of say, first of all, I think the main reason is people just want to know what shopping is needed, because I'm the only one going out of the house right now to do the shopping. So people give me their shopping lists, their requests, but also to say that, look, I need to be left alone at this point in time. I need to do this. I have something important coming up. Let me do this. Please knock before you come into the room if possible. A few things that children perhaps, let's think it from their perspective perhaps. They haven't had to do this in the past, unless for those of us who have already been working from home. And I always suggest keeping buffer time, because things may not go always as planned. This is general, what we would be doing, but even now more important to be a little bit more perhaps aware of these factors. Next slide, please, Lily. Thank you. What I have done is, this is just a very basic example. And this is one of those days when I was feeling particularly inspired. And I said, I'm going to create a daily planner, because it was actually following a day when everything had gone a bit pear-shaped. And I thought to myself, you know what, I have to, being the kind of personality I am, I try to fix things. So I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. But look, it's just an example of perhaps, you know, a structure that can work for any particular person at any one point in time. Please feel free to adapt it. But just as you can see, has systematic slots available with a little bit of wind down space at the end of the day as well. Next slide, please, Lily. So in terms of remote working, I have found capabilities on Zoom that I didn't even know existed. And a sincere thank you to Lily, who was able to guide me through a few of these things last week. And it's great because this is where you reach out to your network. You reach out to people who have those gifts and talents. And people will be almost, you know, too willing and almost very happy to help out at this point in time. And perhaps sometimes a certain degree of vulnerability to say, and honesty to say, look, I'm sorry, I don't know how to use this, you know, is so important. So reach out to your friends and colleagues, people that you know who might have these skills, and request them for a mini tutorial over a virtual coffee. What I've tried to do is I've tried to avoid back-to-back meetings. I know that the Rising Network is going to be launching the Timeout Tuesdays, and Lily will be able to provide you further information. This is to be able to have a little break in the day where you're also learning and developing. I'm finding that I'm having all these calls and webinars and things happening, or then consultations, but I'm not giving enough time for follow-up. And I am ending up using my evenings to do all these emails. And I know that I would normally be working long hours in my commute to London and things, but, you know, it's almost like, hang on, you know, I find myself working a slightly almost longer day, sitting at home. Strange, but just important to a bit of chunking and planning worthwhile. One specific request, and now it depends on what group you fall into here. Managers, please, my request is from an occupational health perspective, and people in HR, please check in with your staff and listen to them through a virtual coffee. The virtual coffee, you know, you probably find the first couple of sessions may not be very productive, you know, in terms of work being done, but just listening to people and listening to people's worries, concerns, which could be so, you know, varied, basically, could make a huge difference. So please, my request is do check in with your staff. Virtual coffee helps. Lily's got an example of like a little sort of, you know, check-in room, which I was able to participate in yesterday, just to give you an example of how this might help. Employees, I know it's not easy for yourselves, especially for individuals who may be in a situation where they're either having to have reduced hours, or companies are deciding to furlough. Of course, that's a completely different discussion in itself. The question is, please talk to your manager. I know people who've had various duties and they're able to negotiate slightly flexible hours around homeschooling and other duties. And for the self-employed, for people who are entrepreneurs, people who've had to perhaps shut shop, these are challenging times, and these will test your entrepreneurial skills. Please, my request is to use the time to find a buddy. Think of your business continuity plan. Very, very important. A lot of organizations are finding themselves now becoming online and virtual, which in one way, which is perhaps a future time, future in time, so to say, you know, evolution for businesses. But it's worthwhile curating new ideas, get in time with web developers, with various people, perhaps to sort of, you know, give you some insights. Reach out to people, you know, that you know, and you might find yourself being able to come up with something completely new, different, and perhaps very robust in time. Next slide, please. Thanks. So maintaining balance and well-being, communicating, agreement in advance, very important. We talked about having debrief sessions. If you can provide a little space in the home for work activities, that can really, really help. I've heard of people, you know, emptying out, you know, little wardrobe spaces to make mini offices in them, if that's necessary. My humble request is, if the man in your house needs a man cave, give them a little man cave spot. it can really, really help. And it could just be a special spot on the sofa or in the living room, because sometimes people just need a space to be able to go into and not be disturbed. This is basically human psychology, especially in times of stress. If you're co-working with your spouse, worthwhile agreeing on priorities, who's going to be doing what, because then that tends to reduce the chances of it becoming a competitive game field where both partners are working and they suddenly say, oh well, I'm supposed to do this and you're supposed to do this, simply because the tasks have changed. Roles and responsibilities have changed in the last 2 weeks as well for a number of people and families. I found this experience rather interesting and informative. I have created an alternative timetable. So geography was basically time to tidy up the bedroom, find missing socks, and find things underneath crayons and things underneath the bed. Home economics was learning how to make mummy a nice coffee, for example. We did a bit of PE by helping my daughter. My daughter helped me. She helped me to do the Hoover, which was really helpful. I think that was good exercise for both of us. Science, learning how to remove grease from pans, and just very important. Being kind to all of to all of us in the family. Just a brief way of how we can try to reframe this situation and do what would come naturally, but perhaps just to have a bit of structure to it. There are a lot of resources. There are free apps, virtual museums. A lot of museums have opened their spaces online free. Amazon, just for reference, has provided an entire access to its Audible apps for children free of charge. A whole load of books and audiobooks to keep children, age-appropriate books, I must say, children entertained and educational as well. Lily, next slide, please. Thanks. So this is with absolute acknowledgement to Jaspreet Kaur Hoti, who's a poet and has actually spoken at Rising Event Festivals before. She's leading the London chapter. You will get a copy of this to be able to look at. These are a few resources there, especially for those of us who have schooling activities or may have nieces and nephews who need to be perhaps kept a little bit entertained, especially during the forthcoming holidays as well. Next slide again, it's very much an extension of that. This is me inspiring myself. What I do is I'm setting the timer to get up every day, at the usual time that I get up. I'm using the time that I would normally be commuting, or perhaps going to the office and setting up things, or going to the clinic, by being able to do what my regular routine has been for the last 20 years. My sun salutation, Surya Namaskar. Lots of information is available online on YouTube how to do this. I'm keeping myself hydrated. I'm doing regular stretches. I am taking time out to maybe do a few moments of contemplation. And for yourselves, it could be meditation. Some people would like to do some prayer. Whatever helps to, give you a little bit of solace, a little bit of comfort in what is really, in our lifetimes, going to be perhaps one of the most challenging periods that we ever are likely to be facing. Free apps. So Headspace is still free. The Insight timer is a lot of it is free, very good, because it helps us to do almost breathing to a count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And very similarly, another app called Breathe to Relax. Again, feel free to experiment what would be good for yourselves. Next slide, please. So just to finalize a few further tips, I have found myself taking out jigsaw puzzles from the cupboard, doing this in the evening, almost like a little wind down activity. And initially it felt almost like, a little bit frivolous, a bit like, oh, hang on, I've got so many things I need to do. I've got to do this, that, the other. I've got to just double check things, about, various other sort of, everyday to day activities. And I thought, hang on, I'm 15 minutes, really, really, really not, I can do something else with my time. But actually just giving yourself 15 minutes to do something that you enjoy. It could be anything that you enjoy. Maybe pick up that book you wanted to read. If we can also think about doing community online events. I know friends who want to do a virtual karaoke night. I know somebody who's joined up to do an online Bible study. Somebody else is going to be running a book club. It just helps to stretch our capabilities on what may be possible. I've also found myself doing a bit of spring cleaning, and it's interesting. I realize, I've started to realize, and although I thought I was quite eco-friendly, but I started thinking to myself and saying, this is a real time of earth reset. Do we really need to consume so much? Every time you want a new notebook or you want something, I would be going to the supermarket and going and getting one. Now, because I'm not going out as much, I'm going through drawers, I'm going through cupboards, and I'm finding things. Incidentally, I found a diary that was labeled 2015, but the days and everything are all the same. So I'm reusing a diary, and it's from 2015, but I could reuse it. So I found that that's been quite a bit of a wake-up call for me in being able to declutter life a little bit, just from being at home and working from home, so to say. I'm also trying to have something to look forward to at the end of the day. This is really important. This is really, really important. And this can really help to give a sense of completion towards the end of the day. And believe me, I hope so. Things will get better. As they say, day follows night. So I think we're on to the final slide now, Lily. Thank you. What I'm perhaps requesting now is for us to do an interactive butterfly breathing exercise. Now, just to say, if you can all put your hands underneath your chin for a moment. Now, I have risk assessed this, and it should be pretty safe for everybody. So put your hands underneath your chins. Keep your elbows as close together to begin with. Good. And if you can, just watch me for the first one. So take a deep breath in, and you get your hands all the way up, your elbows right up to the roof. And as you breathe out, you let go. So we're going to do this together. Hands underneath your chin. Take a deep breath in. And bring your hands up, 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 and feel the stretch in your ribs. Get your elbows up to the ceiling. Get your elbows as close together. And breathe out. And bring your elbows close together so you feel the stretch in your shoulders. And once again, like a butterfly, breathe in. Fill your lungs. Feel your diaphragm. Bring your elbows all the way up to the ceiling. Feel the stretch, become nice and tall. When you're ready, breathe out. And just one more time when you're ready. Once again, take a deep breath in. All the way up, 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 up. Feel the stretch. Give yourself a bit of a wiggle. And gently breathe out. And give yourself a bit of a shake. Some of you might feel like yawning at this stage, or you might feel, oh, that feels a bit not relaxed. I can see some smiles there. This is a really magic exercise, as I would call it. I've taught it to a number of people using Zoom, and perhaps worthwhile doing this at regular intervals. I sincerely hope this has been helpful. As I said, even a couple of tips, as takeaway points will hopefully make this time that we're utilizing in self-isolation a little bit more manageable. And over to Lily.
Oh, thank you, Minha, for that. That was really informative, and I really enjoyed your useful tips. I particularly like this interactive butterfly breathing exercise because I'm certainly one of those people that you described at the start. We just sit there and you don't really move. so much, and you just kind of have back-to-back calls. So that really helps me, Minha. So thank you for sharing that. So what I want to do now is open up the floor for questions. I know some people have been writing some comments in the chat box. So if you do want to ask a question, please hit the raise your hand button, and we'll endeavour to get through you all. And then we'll also go through the chats, the questions in the chat box. And what I'll do is I'll just scan through and then say your name, unmute your mic if you would like to ask the question directly. If there's a pause, I will attempt to read the question myself. Okay, so please do raise your hands if you do have any questions, but I'm now just going to head to the chat box. I see that Miranda has asked a question. Miranda, do you want to perhaps ask Minha your question?
Yes, thank you, Lily, and wonderful session.
Thank you.
Minha, I was really interested in your comment that it takes 5 to 10 minutes for one's brain to get back on track after a disturbance. And I was wondering what's happening neurologically in that time.
That's a really good question, Miranda. And in fact, this has been the subject of a lot of research, specifically with reference to the prefrontal cortex. And in fact, it's the medial prefrontal cortex. The moment, so if we're doing a task and we get distracted away from the task, basically our neural connections, and there's an entire process from the prefrontal cortex, the process to the amygdala, to the various centers of the brain that end up, almost getting a little bit frazzled, if I was to use the terminology there, and they get disrupted. And what happens is that there have been studies done that demonstrate that it can take it's about 8 minutes at an average, 5 to 10 minutes as a median, to actually get back properly into the zone of concentration for that particular task. And what's interesting is that people who do mindfulness, however, practice, are able to get back onto task a little bit more easier. A lot of this research comes from the aviation industry, and especially to do with pilots and checklists. This was adopted in the surgical field to do with checklists. And it was almost to say that, hang on, does the person need to be disturbed at that point in time? And modern life, as it happens to be, is full of distractions. And this is one of the reasons why, we talk about, notifications on social media, notifications on your phone, people, coming in the office, coming and distracting you from your task. There are a lot of people who go into the office, an hour earlier to get work done before the actual office time starts, because that's when the distractions start, Miranda. So it's just worthwhile bearing in mind. And this is why I feel, especially being at home, when, I'm not in my natural workspace, so to say. This is my study, yes, but it's not my natural workspace. I've had to really plan to make sure that I can minimize the so-called distractions and try to sort of, give a bit of a smooth flow to the day. Because knowing myself, if I haven't achieved certain goals by the end of the day, I get very angry with myself. I get frustrated. So this is why you're going back to what is it that I can control. I can control the level of distractions as much as possible. I hope this helps.
Thank you. Any more questions? If you can please raise your hand. Amanda, we've got Amanda Hepton-Patchett, if you want to unmute.
Just unmuting myself. Minha, it's lovely to see you.
Hi, Amanda.
Absolutely excellent session. That was so good. I just have a question really around, you've obviously had to make some personal adjustments, so thank you very much for sharing that. What would you say has been your biggest challenge in terms of shifting your mindset? So you've talked a lot about the power of the mind and how, we can control our thinking. What's the biggest adjustment do you think you've had to make?
Amanda, that's a really, really good question. And if anything, I still feel that I'm making the adjustment. If I may share, and I think I know a number of people on this call, it's my sense of being helpless, where there's so much that I want to do, I had a phone call day before yesterday at 11:30 at night from a very close medical colleague in India, and it was 3:30 in the morning at their time, and they couldn't sleep, and they were semi-suicidal because the hospital was not providing them the right PPE, protective equipment. And this is a lady, obviously won't mention the name, and they said, that they are so anxious about the whole situation that they do not know what to do. So I found myself, at 11:30 UK time, sort of trying to almost guide this person through what they can and perhaps what they can't do, including putting them in touch with my local occupational health colleagues who I know through my networks in Kolkata at that time of the night. I'm a natural fixer, and being a doctor, I'm also, very much, my specialty is occupational medicine. So for every 1,000 GPs is one of me. And therefore, I also feel very helpless that, I'm not there on the right now, on the front line, doing the intubations, but I'm not an anesthetist by training. Yes, we all learn how to do this. Being a natural person who wants to go and sort of, save lives and protect lives and things, I've really had to reset my my appreciation of what is it that I can do in this moment that is going to be of best use to the world. And normally I try to do everything for everybody. For those of you who know me, really trying to do everything for everybody. But I've almost had to harness and almost write down, okay, Minha, you're good at doing this, you're good at doing this. Focus on those strengths. So that's what I've tried to do, Amanda. And worldwide, we've been supporting, we've been distributing soap and sanitizers in the slums, basically, of different parts of the world where we know that this is going to make a difference. So I've almost had to completely sort of, reevaluate what I do. And I found myself yesterday looking at my to-do list and seeing things that, were almost like wishful thinking, or that'd be nice to do, that'd be nice to do. And I was actually quite ruthless. I'll be quite honest. I took them out of my list because the world is very different now than it was perhaps 2 weeks ago. So I've just had to completely gear in and say to myself, this is what's going to be possible. This is what I'm going to do. This is where I can use my time, resources, and energy.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. I think the point about managing your expectations and being realistic is
you've said it.
And the comment I made about really being kind to yourself as well as being kind to others, because I know you're very to others, be kind to yourself.
Amanda, you've absolutely said it. And in fact, and also I find myself, I gave you an example of putting myself in my 11-year-old daughter's shoes. I mean, I would go a bit mad if I only saw children for 2 weeks. I'll be quite honest. I mean, she's been amongst adults for the last 2 weeks. So I think my empathy score has perhaps gone a little bit up. I'm a nice person. I hope, I'm thought of being as a nice person, but actual genuine empathy. And things like, the other thing that's happened is that I've connected with people who I would never be talking, I mean, not that I wouldn't choose to talk to, or, I would never be crossing paths with in general, in daily life, basically.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I've been able to do things like that.
Thank you. Thank you. Just want to conscious that time is running out, and I want to try and share everyone's comments and get some more questions in before we close. So just a couple of comments in the chat box. And thank you, Anne Bailey. Anne Bailey suggested that she's got a great tutorial for those who want to use Teams to set up and run virtual teams. Thank you for that, Anne. If you want to share that in the chat box, everybody can pick up the link from that box there. Another great comment from Sabina Mahmood. Minha, I really enjoyed the stretch exercise, and we'll make it mandatory intro into all meetings. I think that's a great idea. I'm definitely going to do that. Any more questions? If you want to hit the raise your hand button and unmute your mic, then we can see if you've got a question. Sarah Stone has made a comment saying, thanks, Minha, that was very useful for anyone with children. She said, share the Twitter handle at Adrian Bethune on Twitter. Did a great webinar yesterday on supporting children. It will be available on his feed later this week. And on the children note and homeschooling, we do have a COVID-19 Time Out Tuesday special with Jaspreet Kaur, who Minha mentioned. That's on the 7th of April at 3 p.m. Any more questions from anyone? Is there any more? Okay. Let's have a look. Does anyone have any more questions for Minha? Oh, there's a hand raised there. Emily. Emily Levette, do you want to go ahead?
Hi, yes, thank you. Hi, Mina. There was an important point you were saying, the 3 stages we have to go through during this period. And one situation we faced with my husband is that we were never used to work together from home. And indeed, we had to negotiate. And what happened, it was not only the physical space, but the sound space. We had to really not listen to each other. We are working for different companies and had to find a way that he was in the basement and I was 2 floors above. So all this, I'm really thankful you show the different step and how to grow and accept from that on what we have to accept from each other.
You know, Emily, you are so correct about this. Absolutely. And somehow it also makes me reflect back on what is the meaning of work? You know, what is it that, we get up, we get dressed in our work clothes. This is just one more thing that I was talking about, the new normality, about when we go out to work, we have an identity, we have our space, we have our place. And then when we come home, we are our home self, basically. And it's what you just said, those 3 stages, the fear, learning, and growth, where now there's a bit of a gray area between, who am I in the workspace or who am I not in the workspace? A small little tip in case this helps. So you can see that I'm actually wearing and this is me, I'm wearing my work clothes now, although I'm in the house. And when I leave the study, I take off my jacket and I hang it on the door. And it's almost like, my way of saying that, okay, now I'm going to cook lunch, for example, So when I leave the study, just have something that you associate with work, for example, that you leave in your workspace, and then you go become, Emily, basically. And then when you come back to your workspace, you become, the Emily of the work, for example. And that's a little tip that I've been doing. And another little small point, if I may, Lily, is to say that while I'm doing my rummage and things, of things, I'm also trying to find out, any favorite pieces of jewelry or things that perhaps had been at the bottom of the drawer, and doing my own little fashion show. And it's just the way I'm just trying to keep a little bit positive, in this time. Small little thing.
Thank you, Minha. I'm going to have to wrap up. I do see some additional comments. I think I'll just read a final one from Mina Chid. She said, wonderful presentation and very inspirational. Thank you. I love the sun salutations and the breathing exercises. Also the appreciation and reference of earth considerations and recycling of existing resources. So thank you, Minha. So on that note, I'm going to have to wrap up so we can close sharply at 1. Before I do that, I've just got a few slides that I want to share with you. Minha, thank you very much for your informative talk. Thank you everybody for participating today. I just want to highlight a few upcoming events that we've got coming up in the Rising Network. So in response to the whole COVID-19, we have launched Time Out Tuesday. So that is your chance to maintain human connection outside of the home for 30 minutes every week, happening on Tuesdays. The first one we've got kicking off is on the 7th of April, which is homeschooling for parents. So for you mums and dads out there that want to get some tips from Jaspreet Kaur, who's part of the Rising Network. She is actually a history teacher, background kind of in gender studies as well. So she's got a background in teaching. She's got a load of free online resources that she's created specifically for parents during this period. So you can join myself and Jaspreet on the 7th of April for a 30-minute virtual coffee. The following week on the 14th of April, we've got Staying Connected. And we have Dr. Froswa dialing in from Dallas, Texas, Dallas, from the US, and she's doing a PhD on connectivity and social capital. We've got her dialing in for 30 minutes for that session, so do join us there. Then we, as you know, we like to have a bit of fun. A good way to release stress and anxiety is through laughter. So on the 21st of April, we've got Zara Janjua. She's a comedian, writer, actress, presenter, producer. She's running a session with us on humorous observations of COVID-19. And then the final one of the month is 28th of April. We have a certified laughter yoga teacher coming to join us, laughter yoga to release stress and anxiety. So do be prepared to come along and laugh during that session. Some great yoga, kind of facial yoga exercises as well. So, and outside of the COVID-19 events, we do have some other kind of masterclasses and webinars. 15th of April, perimenopause and menopause within the workplace. And then in May, we've got intercultural dimensions in HR and management. But just please make a note that we will be launching more and more online events and webinars over the coming weeks. So what you'll see in the month of May and June, there will be a lot more online events that you can access to help you stay connected with other people whilst you're at home. So on that note, I wish you all a very, very good afternoon. I hope you're all keeping safe and sane out there. Thank you again to Minha for that excellent talk. Thank you everybody for your participation and getting involved in today's session. We couldn't do this without you. So you will be receiving an email from us. If you could kindly share some feedback, we would be really grateful, just so we know what kind of content, what kind of speakers that you want to hear from. So again, thank you very much and have a great week and enjoy the rest of your day.